On the morning of the 18th of June, 1982, a man crossing Blackfriars Bridge in London spotted something that would stop him in his tracks. Hanging from the scaffolding just below was the body of a man. That man was Roberto Calvi, known as God's banker. His pockets were bizarrely stuffed with bricks and $14,000 in cash. The chairman of one of Italy's largest banks, his death was ruled a suicide. But the circumstances suggested a ritualistic murder, the explosive finale to a conspiracy connecting the Vatican, the Sicilian Mafia, and a secret Masonic lodge. This is the story of what happens when faith, finance, and felony merge. Hi, my name is Richard. If you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me and help me keep making stories like this for you. Thanks. But now to the story. So, how does a man end up hanging from a London bridge? Our story starts in post-war Milan with the ambitious Roberto Calvi. The son of a bank manager, Calvi was a financial prodigy with a hunger for power. He joined the Banco Ambrosiano in 1947 and shot up the ranks, becoming chairman by 1975. Originally, Banco Ambrosiano was founded as a Catholic bank with a moral mission. But under Calvi, it went rogue. He transformed it into an international financial predator. Calvi was brilliant, no doubt, but his methods were unorthodox. He created a dizzying maze of offshore shell companies in places like Panama and the Bahamas. This wasn't just clever accounting. It was a machine built for shady purposes. It let him sneak huge sums of money out of Italy, illegally inflate the bank's stock price, and most importantly, grant massive, unsecured loans to phantom companies that he secretly controlled. To the outside world, Banco Ambrosiano looked like a pillar of Italian success. But behind the curtain, Calvi was building a financial fantasy held together by sheer nerve, and he was moving money for clients who lived in the darkest corners of society. His most powerful client was right across the river, inside the walls of Vatican City. The Institute for the Works of Religion, better known as the Vatican Bank, was a key partner for Banco Ambrosiano. This gave Calvi access and credibility that money couldn't buy. His main ally inside the Holy See was Archbishop Marcinkus, the tough, American-born head of the Vatican Bank. Marcinkus was a pragmatist, famously saying, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys." He and Calvi formed a powerful, secret alliance. The Vatican Bank, or IOR, was its own special beast. Tucked inside the sovereign Vatican City state, it was conveniently immune to most Italian laws and financial oversight. Calvi and Marcinkus used this to their full advantage. The heart of their scheme revolved around so-called letters of patronage. On behalf of the Vatican Bank, Marcinkus would issue these letters for Calvi's Panamanian shell companies. These letters were effectively a stamp of approval, suggesting the Vatican was behind these entities, which allowed Calvi to borrow billions from his own bank's subsidiaries. So where did all that money go? It's been alleged that the funds were used for everything from propping up dictatorships in South America to secretly funding the anti-communist solidarity movement in Poland, a cause dear to Pope John Paul II. But here's the genius of the scam. While issuing these letters, Marcinkus had Calvi secretly sign documents absolving the Vatican Bank of any actual legal responsibility for the loans. It was a perfect circle of fraud. The Vatican lent its holy name, Calvi got the cash, and the money simply disappeared. Marcinkus later claimed he was just doing what Calvi asked. Shielded by diplomatic immunity, he was never prosecuted in Italy. But as investigators would soon find out, the Vatican wasn't the only powerful group enjoying Calvi's financial magic tricks. In the murky world of Italian power, banking and organized crime have often gone hand in hand. Calvi's bank was a prime example. For the Sicilian Mafia and Rome's vicious Banda della Magliana gang, Banco Ambrosiano was the perfect laundry service for their drug money. Calvi's web of shell companies could wash millions, turning dirty cash into clean assets. And the Mafia doesn't like to be questioned. In 1981, when a prominent industrialist named Carlo De Benedetti became deputy chairman and started asking too many questions, he lasted less than 2 months, resigning after uncovering serious irregularities. His replacement, Roberto Calvi, wasn't so lucky. He was shot in the legs in a daytime ambush by a gunman with reported ties to the Magliana gang. The message was crystal clear. Calvi was untouchable. But there was an even more sinister layer to all this. Calvi was a member of a secret Masonic lodge called Propaganda Do, or P2. Led by the master manipulator Licio Gelli, P2 wasn't your average club. It was an illegal shadow government, a state within a state that had its tentacles in every corner of Italian life. When police raided Gelli's villa in 1981, they found a membership list that read like a who's who of the Italian elite: government ministers, generals, judges, spies, and top journalists. Gelli, a man with alleged ties to the CIA and global arms dealers, used P2 to manipulate Italian politics for a right-wing, anti-communist agenda. For P2, Calvi's bank was a weapon. It's widely reported that Calvi funneled Ambrosiano's money to help P2 buy a controlling stake in Italy's most prestigious newspaper, giving the lodge a massive propaganda machine. So you had this unholy alliance. Calvi's bank was serving the Vatican, laundering money for the Mafia, and funding the political schemes of P2. It was an incredibly dangerous balancing act, and by the early 1980s, it was all starting to unravel. The first official alarm bell rang back in 1978. Italy's central bank audited Banco Ambrosiano and found that billions of lire had been illegally exported, issuing a report that basically predicted the coming disaster. A criminal investigation was launched, but the forces protecting Calvi were strong. The investigation faced incredible roadblocks. The lead magistrate was assassinated by a terrorist group, and the Bank of Italy official who led the inspection was arrested on bogus charges that were thrown out years later. Still, the walls were closing in. In 1981, the raid on Licio Gelli's villa exposed the P2 list and put Calvi directly in the crosshairs. He was arrested, tried, and found guilty of illegally exporting millions. He got a 4-year sentence and a hefty fine. During a short stint in jail, he even attempted suicide. And yet, incredibly, his powerful friends pulled some strings, and he was released pending his appeal, calmly walking right back into his office as chairman. But it was only a temporary fix. By 1982, the black hole at the center of Banco Ambrosiano was too big to hide. The loans made to those shell companies were coming due, and there was no money. The bank was facing a catastrophic crisis, with debts estimated to be somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 billion. The Bank of Italy had to step in, but it was far too late. The whole rotten structure was about to collapse. As the bank's ruin became certain, Roberto Calvi started to panic. His powerful protectors, the Vatican, the Mafia, P2 all began to back away. He was no longer their golden goose. He was a liability who knew way too much. In early June 1982, he wrote a desperate letter to Pope John Paul II, reportedly warning of a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions, where the church would suffer the gravest damage. He was pleading for a lifeline, but the line was dead. A few days later, with his bank collapsing and his appeal hearing looming, Calvi shaved off his famous mustache, grabbed a fake passport, and slipped out of his apartment in Rome. He flew to London, allegedly traveling with men connected to both the criminal underworld and Italian intelligence. He was on the run, not from the law, but from his own partners. He checked into a small apartment in Chelsea, reportedly acting like a man who knew his time was up. Back in Milan, his empire was turning to dust. On the 17th of June, the day before his body was found, Calvi's longtime personal secretary, Graziella Corrichet, wrote a furious note condemning him for the damage he'd done. Then, She jumped to her death from a window at the bank's headquarters. Some say the 4th floor, some say the 5th. It was ruled a suicide. Just hours later, hundreds of miles away, Roberto Calvi would meet his own terrifyingly sad end. The discovery of Calvi's body under Blackfriars Bridge kicked off a mystery that's still debated today. A London coroner quickly ruled it a suicide, but Calvi's family never bought it. They were sure he was murdered. The scene was thick with symbolism. The name Blackfriars was seen by some as a chilling nod to P2 members, who were sometimes called the Blackfriars. The bricks in his pockets? A classic Masonic punishment for traitors, and a well-known Mafia signature. Experts hired by his family argued that Calvi couldn't have hanged himself. His neck injuries weren't consistent with hanging, and crucially, there was no rust or paint on his shoes from the scaffolding he supposedly would have climbed. In 2002, Italian courts officially reclassified his death as a homicide. So, who did it? Prosecutors in Italy pointed the finger at the Sicilian Mafia, arguing that Calvi was killed because he had lost their money and was threatening to talk. In 2005, 5 people went on trial for his murder, including a top mafia boss, Giuseppe Calò, and the businessman who helped Calvi get to London. But after a long trial, all 5 were acquitted in 2007 for lack of evidence. On the 6th of August, 1982, just weeks after Calvi's death, Banco Ambrosiano was placed into compulsory liquidation, the biggest banking collapse in Italian history. The Vatican, while never admitting legal fault, eventually acknowledged a moral involvement and paid around $240 million to the bank's creditors to settle claims. But for the murder of Roberto Calvi, there has been no justice. The main suspects were acquitted, and the case remains officially unsolved. See you next time.